Hey
Hey.
everyone.
Hey,
Hi.
everyone. Hey,
Hey,
Sonia.
hey Sonia. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, we just realized that people are watching Daybell and Reed right now, so people probably aren't wanting to break from that, which is okay. Hopefully, we'll get uh some on the replay. So, yeah.
So yeah, we'll just see how it goes. If people pop in, they pop in. If they
Mhm.
don't, they can watch it on replay. Not a big deal. And I know sometimes this time of day is difficult for some people too because they work and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. So not a big issue. What Rachel and I planned on doing today was just kind of chatting about Karen Reed and just kind of where the investigation is to this point, problems that we have seen with the investigation, that sort of thing. Um, we wanted to do we wanted to let anyone who's listening know that we're not here to judge whether she is guilty or whether she's innocent.
Right.
We're basically here, just to talk about it, right, Rachel?
Yeah, I what what I told Scott earlier is I haven't done a ton of background stuff on this because I really want to hear the witnesses, and I will say I've looked up some of the timeline that's already been discussed just because it's so, like, so many people and so many things happened. I'm trying to make sense of it in my head, which must be very hard for the jurors, but the only things that I think I won't ever be convinced of no matter what, unless there's some major mic drop from either side, is that I don't think that, oh, Sonia, that's funny. I don't think that you'll convince me that either Karen or anyone in the house hurt John on purpose, that they planned ahead of time that this was what they were going to do and that they did it with malice or intention.
Right.
Well, it's a good point, Sonia, too. So Karen Reed is a woman who is accused by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, accused of hitting her boyfriend, who is a police officer, a Canton, Massachusetts police officer, hitting
Mhm.
him by backing up into him with her vehicle and leaving him in a snowstorm, essentially to die. And the state's cases that this was intentional and or accidental, but regardless, she did it. She knew she did it, and she left him. And the defense is presenting evidence that they believe there is a huge conspiracy, a huge cover up, I should say, not conspiracy, but cover up job that was done by multiple police departments, the Canton Police Department, the state police department, among others, um, because a lot of those individuals who worked for those entities were at the house where the boyfriend was injured, um, found in the front lawn of a Canton police officer's home, where they were all supposed to meet for a party. And so that's sort of, I don't know, did I miss any major points of that, Scott?
I don't think so. Other than it's actually John O'Keefe's actually a Boston police
Oh,
officer.
sorry. Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, yeah. No, that's fine. And yeah, same with I think the Alberts were. I think Brian Albert was also a Boston police officer, but he retired. So
Okay,
yeah, no,
great.
that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So we've heard a lot of evidence. Well, what we've actually heard most about is the initial moments, the immediate hours prior to what happened with John, and like, what everyone was doing. They were out at bars hanging out, a bunch of friends. And then we've learned who showed up at the scene to find John, the 911 that was called, the officers that showed up, and sort of what everyone is saying ensued from there,
Mhm.
in terms of the investigation. And so I told Scott today I'm going to sort of put him on the spot a little bit and interview him, because I think that we have a lot to learn from his expertise, having been law enforcement. So, Scott, first, I was thinking, were you an investigator, a detective? Like, what's the difference? What do we call you in that role?
Well, so a detective is essentially an investigator, and it's just kind of
Okay.
semantics. I mean, it depends on
Okay.
what department. At my department, I was assigned to investigations as a detective.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it's kind of all one and the same. And I did that
Okay.
for a period of 9 years.
Okay. So we have this situation where John O'Keefe is in the front lawn. It's a big case you didn't know. Every witness multiple times is asked what the weather was like. It was snowing. It was a blizzard.
Big time.
It dawned on me
Yep.
last night. I was like, it'd be really brain scattering is if somehow someone looked up the weather that day and realized there wasn't a snowstorm. And then we would all be like, what is going on? Anyway,
Exactly.
that was me like trying to fall asleep. Okay. So, so we have Karen and her friend showed up to the house. They see John O'Keefe, Officer O'Keefe, laying in the front lawn.
Hmm.
911 is called. So that's kind of where I want to start with
Okay.
this. So the first person on the scene was from Canton Police Department.
Yes.
Okay. So Scott, you're a patrol. Let's say you're a patrol, because that's what this person was, patrol officer. And
Right.
those are the people that you get 911 calls. They're the first ones on the scene, right? Because they're already out in their cars.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, so you show up to the scene, Scott, Officer Scott, and Officer Snyder, and this woman's hysterical. John O'Keefe is on the ground. EMT is on their way. What is the first thing that you do?
Well,
Hypothetically.
so yeah, I mean, the first thing that you do is obviously if the EMTs, if the paramedics are not on the way, you get them on the way right away immediately. Okay.
Okay.
And then what you try to do is secure that scene as best you can by getting people away from the body. If they're around the body, you don't want anything around the body contaminated. Um, it's already going to be contaminated somewhat once the EMTs arrive, because they're gonna have to try to perform life-saving measures. So
Mhm.
they're going to trample that scene a little bit. There's only so much you can do there. But
Okay.
the key thing is that you try to make a determination, first of all, basically what you have. Okay. So in this case, you've got a body that is in the snow, that is all swollen and is bleeding, which would lead you to believe as an officer that, there's potentially been a fight, foul play, whatever. So once you make that determination that, you may have something of that nature, then you go ahead and you secure that scene. What I would have done had I been there first on the scene is I would have um, contacted my supervisor, let him know what I had, and then once you get people there, you go ahead and rope that scene off, secure that scene, and nobody goes in or out of the scene except for the people that have to actually be there, like the life saving, the paramedics, and so on and so forth. I would have contacted the people in the residence and explained, we're here. We have someone on your front lawn.
Mhm.
Don't come out of your residence. We don't want the scene contaminated. And then you kind of go from there and start processing the scene. Once you decide whether there's a possibility of it being suspicious, here in Oregon, where I worked, we have what's called the HIT team, which is a homicide investigation team. If you think you've got something of a suspicious nature, you immediately start trying to get that team deployed,
Mhm.
and then you just hold the scene until they get there. Um, I would I would have one officer taking notes at the scene of anyone that shows up, entered that scene, which paramedics entered that scene, which paramedics
Right.
left that scene. So yeah,
So, like, some pretty meticulous note taking needs to take place
absolutely.
immediately, right? So,
Right.
what we know happened is this officer shows up, the EMT shows up, they're performing life-saving measures, they're trying to figure things out, and eventually, a couple other officers come on the scene. So, the Canton Police Department,
Hmm.
what was explained in testimony, and forgive me, I'm not gonna be able to, like, recall these people's names off the top of my head, so I'm gonna just be giving, like, overarching the testimony.
Sure.
Um, so we heard that Canton Police Department does not investigate homicides,
Hmm.
that they're not equipped to gather evidence, they don't have evidence tape, they don't have that stuff back at the station to get, and we know that there were a few patrol officers on the scene, um, initially, and I'm not sure at what point they started doing these things, but they said they put some crime scene tape up, but the wind was, like, so strong it didn't really do much,
Mhm.
I don't know who was standing there securing the scene. I know they put Karen in the cop car at one
Mhm.
point,
Mhm.
to kinda, like, she was freaking out.
Right.
We don't really know where the other people were. Were they standing right next to John? Were they we do know that nobody measured exactly where his body was. Um, there was no markers placed or before they took him
Right.
into the ambulance, so we know, like, roundabout where he was.
Right.
Uh, Not sure how much that matters, but, I don't know if pictures were taken prior to him being taken, I don't know. Um, but it doesn't sound like a lot of information was being gathered from the people that were there.
Right.
I know even it sounds like the EMT asked Karen what happened. She said, according to the EMT, "I hit him," but there was no follow-up. Well, they said, what do you mean you hit him?" And there was no response.
Right.
Or she's kind of flippant, and nobody followed up, which, quite honestly, I get it. The EMT should, ask those questions, of course, because it helps them with
Mhm.
treatment. But, like, nobody followed up, supposedly, of anybody who heard her say that. No one followed up. "What do you mean that you hit him? With what?
Right.
How? What happened?" Nobody,
Right.
nobody at that
Right.
moment on the scene. Would that be something that you would really hone in on in that circumstance?
You have to. All those things
Okay.
are important, Rachel. You can't leave anything unturned from the get-go. You have to, if someone says, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, you have to dig deeper into that, or at least get that information to the police officers on scene so they can dig
Mhm.
deeper into it. As far as photographs go, you can't take too many photographs at a
No.
scene. You just can't.
Oh,
It's
you
better
mean
to,
you should take them, is what you're
I'm saying
saying?
you should take them.
There's no
Absolutely.
such thing as too many. Okay, yeah,
Right, right.
yeah.
Yeah, you need to take as many photographs as possible. I would not have moved the body until the homicide team was there. If he's clearly
Except
deceased,
I don't think he was declared deceased until later, so I'm not sure what that
exactly.
situation
Yeah.
was.
So,
Yeah,
there's no perfect scene and there's no perfect
right,
scenario. So, they did what they did in that situation because that's what they felt was best.
right,
Um,
right.
but you know, once going back to what I said earlier, once you have the proper people dispatched and heading to the scene, you just hold that scene
Mhm.
until they get there and let them do their thing. That's
Okay.
how it should work in the real world, in the perfect world.
Okay, so let's talk about then a couple things.
Hi.
Um,
Hi, Don.
so Oh,
Sorry.
hey, Don. Hey, I was like, I don't see anyone in your room. Okay, Scott's talking to people again. Okay, so what I was thinking is about this whole like, and I don't know, I can't remember exactly in the timeline when it was, but I know the state police weren't there yet because I believe it was the
Right.
initial cops on scene who got a leaf blower and decided to start looking for evidence before the supervisors showed up. What
Yes.
what can you is there a rational way that you as a former law enforcement professional can walk through that thought process? Like, these are people that say they don't typically investigate homicides. Like, I understand if there's
Mhm.
obvious evidence, they want to make sure they're holding that, preserving that in whatever way. But can you walk me through any rational thought process there?
I really can't. I struggle with that one because, you're trying to preserve evidence. You don't know what's in that snow. And so, the last thing that I would have done is taken a leaf blower and potentially blown evidence all over the place and scattered it away from where it needed to be.
But I
I
can't
I
wrap my head around that.
I don't know if I mean, I honestly have never ever heard of that being done
And,
anywhere before until this trial.
and that guy said we've done it before.
I know. I
And
know.
I'm
So
thinking to
maybe
myself, who is this person's case that they used a leaf blower?
I just don't get that piece. And because then what you're doing is you're contaminating the scene by your own
Yeah.
use, by yourself. And so it doesn't make any sense to me to do that. As far as evidence collection,
Well, hold on. They said
yeah.
one of the things they said is that because of the elements, they were
Hmm.
trying to prevent any evidence from being affected by the elements by using the leaf blower to find what was there, but I still can't. I mean, how does a leaf
Yeah.
blower not affect the evidence? Like,
Yeah.
I don't get it.
I don't really have a good answer for that, other than maybe that's something that is common back in that area. With snowy weather, but I just can't wrap my head around how that would be effective, because you
Right.
are going to be blowing stuff all over the place.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
here's another question about the immediate scene.
Hmm.
So we know that some of John's clothes had to be removed
Hmm.
because of, the life-saving measures that needed to be taken. And those clothes, we don't know what happened to them. I don't believe we know what happened with those. I
Right.
don't know if they got taken in the ambulance or what, but I didn't hear the prosecution talk about that as evidence. Did you catch any of
No,
that?
no, they really weren't very clear on that. I didn't catch it either. I know when they were talking to the paramedics, they said, "Well, what happened to his clothes once they were removed?" And they were like, the medics were like, "Well, some of it may have gone onto the floor, some of it
Right.
may have gone next to the body, that sort of thing." All that stuff, common practice would be obviously to collect it. If
Mhm.
there's
Bag it,
if
right?
bag it, yeah. If there's
Yeah.
blood on the clothing, if you have bloody clothing, you never want to use plastic bags. You want to use paper bags. Plastic will allow the blood to kind of start, for lack of a better term, rotting the evidence, basically.
Yeah.
So you use paper bags and you collect each piece individually
Mm,
and you label it with a case number, assuming you've already drawn a case number as the initial people on scene, which they certainly should have. And then you go from there.
so we don't really know about that yet anyway.
Right.
But if the Canton Police Department does not collect evidence, they don't have evidence bags, they don't have
Hmm.
evidence tape, they don't.
Yeah.
So like they're just leaving the clothes where they are until the people come who have that stuff, correct? Just making
That's
sure no one touches it, no one moves it, no one.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
first of all, I'll say that it's kind of odd to me, and this is not a slam on the Canton Police Department. It's just kind of odd to me that a police department would not have the proper stuff for a crime scene, like crime scene tape, evidence bags, things like that.
Mhm.
So, but in the event that they don't, if they truly don't, then yeah, you don't have a choice but to try to just secure that evidence until
Right.
the homicide team gets there and they can take care of the evidence properly.
Right. And so I have not heard any mention of a CSI team
Me neither.
at all.
Nope.
So
Nope.
do they not have one? Is that
I don't.
possible?
It's odd to me. I mean,
Okay.
y- you know, I don't know
Like
how big.
at what point do you call, like if there's a CSI, at what point do
Mhm.
you call them in?
I would have once you determine that you have something of a suspicious nature, you've got a dead body on the lawn, things are not adding up, you call them in.
Okay, and like the patrol person, or they'd call the supervisor and the supervisor would do that?
Either, probably the supervisor, but either
Okay.
or.
Okay.
The supervisor could instruct his officers to make the call and, start getting people assembled and get them
Okay.
there as quick as possible.
Okay, so state police show up.
Hmm.
Well, let's talk about. Well, okay, real quick, Sonia was asking about the arm situation. So what I heard the EMT testify to, the injuries on John's arm,
Hmm.
what I heard them testify to is that there were no rips to his outer clothing,
Correct.
that they noticed anyway,
Right.
and that, it was all intact, that the abrasions or whatever you're gonna call them, lacerations on his arm were not bleeding. They were not
Right.
actively bleeding. There's already coagulation going on. They appeared to be, like, at least he said, I think, something to the effect of, like, earlier in the previous evening may have happened,
Hmm.
if then, but it was not fresh, like, there was red blood in the snow from his other injuries, but his
Right.
arm, it was not from that arm. So I thought, and there wasn't blood from those on his clothing that we know of yet anyway.
Right.
So that was really interesting.
So there's a couple of things there. I mean, like you just said, Rachel, it could have been caused from previous stuff. First of all,
Yeah.
they could have been fighting on the way. He and Karen could have been fighting on the way, and she could have scratched him. It could have been from something previous. What it doesn't look like to me, and I obviously didn't examine it closely because I'm not there,
Mhm.
but it doesn't look to me like dog bites. There's scratches, but
Mhm.
there's no lower canine punctures either. There's no upper and lower canine punctures. So, you've got the whole dog theory that's running
Yeah.
around. I'm just not sure about that yet. And I just need to hear
Yeah.
more evidence on that. My gut instinct is that the arm is previous injuries. And I
Okay.
think people are getting really hung up on that, which I understand because this is
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
very confusing case.
It
It
is.
is.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we've got these people on the scene. So, okay, at what point in this whole process, from the time the first patrol person comes, are you knocking on the door of the house that
Well,
John is in front of?
I think it needed to be done pretty darn early. First of all, just to let them know that you're there. There is a
Mhm.
body on the lawn. You don't want them coming out and potentially contaminating the scene and walking all over evidence. So I would have done it pretty early in that respect.
Okay.
In terms of actually talking to the people in the house, once you get enough people there, depending on how you're going to handle the investigation, if Canton's going to take the lead on it because they don't have enough people to respond from the state police or whatever, I think you need to start talking to those people pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't super quickly. And so from testimony, we know 2 officers went inside the Alberts
Hmm.
home.
Hmm.
There were few people there, and they sat them down at, well, there's some debate, I don't know, did they stay in the foyer, did they sit down? I don't know. They
Right.
sat them down at the dining room table all together and chatted for 45 minutes.
Right.
There was no documentation done about that conversation. Tell me about that.
So that's absolutely appalling to me.
Okay.
Honestly, it is. I don't know why they did that. I mean, some people think that looks very suspicious that they didn't
Mhm.
document anything. And yeah, it does. But does that mean there was a cover up? No, it could also mean that it's just sloppy police work.
Mhm.
But when you go in, especially with once again, you guys, we've got a dead body on the front lawn here, and you're talking to these people. You separate the people if you have enough officers. You separate them and talk to them separately. I just kind of think that they didn't really even consider the fact that these police officers could potentially be involved in this.
That's what I'm thinking, is that
Yeah,
they were just so like, "This is a cop's house." Like,
right,
this, they had nothing
right,
to do with it. They were asleep. They were what, like, just that tunnel vision of, like, and not wanting to, um I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I try to, like, put myself in their shoes thinking, like, "I don't wanna make these fellow cops pissed off that I'm, like, acting like
correct.
I'm suspecting them," like, they should understand that this is protocol, but I don't wanna give them a hard
Yes.
time. I don't, like, uh,
And they should
yeah.
understand that it's protocol,
Yeah.
and you have to do your job, and you have to just talk to the people that are there at the house, whether they're
Mhm.
police officers, whoever they are. You have to do that piece, and you absolutely have to document it in your notebook, and then write a report afterwards on what was said or not said or what have you. To do that, to not do that, to me is just beyond sloppy police work.
Yeah.
It just is. It
It's
just is.
very,
Yeah.
yeah, it's almost like it didn't register to the cops either how bad his
Hmm.
injuries were. It's sort of
Yeah.
like this guy on the lawn, I don't know what they were thinking, but it just seems like they just didn't take it that seriously, like,
Hmm.
I'm really not sure. I don't know. Um, and so here's another thing. So they allegedly hear that Karen says, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him."
Hmm.
Um, when someone says that at a scene, okay, first of all, they didn't follow up on, "What do you mean? What do you mean?"
Right.
Are you letting that person leave the scene?
No, you can't do that. You need to sequester that person and interview
Okay.
them right there at the scene, put them in the police car, whatever, have someone talk to them. Maybe even say, hey, would you be willing to come down to the station and give a statement where it's,
Mhm.
you're out of the elements, it's a little more comfortable, that sort of thing. That's what you do.
Okay. So they put her in the car for a bit, but then she got out. And
Yeah.
she's like in and out of the car and they kind of weren't making her stay
Ru-
there. And
Running
then they
around.
told her
Yeah.
to go home. They told her to go home.
Right.
They told her to go
Right.
home. So, and then they didn't interview her until she was at her dad's house later that day in the late afternoon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And one of the dangers there, let's say, and I'm not suggesting Karen did this and is involved. I'm saying
Mhm.
if Karen
Right.
is involved, okay, by not interviewing her for hours upon, letting hours lapse before you interview her, it gives her plenty of time to get her story straight
Mhm.
and prepare some kind of a story on, how things went down. And
Right.
so, when you've got what they call spontaneous utterances like that, where they just kind of, out of excitement, they just kind of blurted out, I hit him. That's key. You have to
Yeah.
focus in on that and you have to do it then. And I would have said, let's get you out of the elements. Come on down to the station. Let's talk for a little bit. We'll get you some coffee. Go from there.
Yeah, and, like, the fact no one focused in on that, like, that's
Yeah.
so major to me. If that did happen, so then part of me starts to think, well, maybe she didn't actually say that, and that's why they didn't focus
Hmm.
in on it. Because to me, it's like, "Oh, I've got a confession. I know exactly what happened. She's telling me."
Hmm.
N nobody
Yeah.
nobody said like, that would have been, like, first and foremost, almost, like, besides securing the scene, would be talking with her
Absolutely.
who's saying that. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
Yeah.
just, like, wild.
And her friends that drove her to the scene, because you want to know if she made any statements to them in the car on the way there.
Yeah,
You talk to everybody,
right.
and you do it as quickly as possible. And if you need to go back and re-interview them, so be it, but you at least
Sure.
get initial statements, and if things don't start adding up properly, then you go back
Right.
and you talk to them again.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
So, okay, so would you have called in for a search warrant of the house?
It would depend. First of all, if you can get a consent search of the residence, great. Okay. The way consent works is, let's say they said to the Alberts, will you let us search your house? And the
Mhm.
Alberts say yes. And then the Alberts start getting a little concerned for whatever reason. And again, I'm not saying the Alberts are involved. I'm saying this is a
Right.
hypothetical situation. They can take that consent back and say, no, I don't want you to search anymore. And you have to
Okay.
stop. So sometimes it's almost better to, I had a conversation with my son about this, because what all three of my sons are police officers, and they were like, you go into the house, you temporarily detain, not arrest, just
Right.
detain everyone in that house, you get their statements, and then if you think you need to apply for a search warrant, that's the safer thing to do, because then they
Okay.
can't deny consent. Once you deny consent, then you're stuck until you can get
Yeah.
a search warrant, and they can do whatever they want to do inside that house and alter the scene.
Right. So
Yeah,
the
that's
faster the better. The faster the better.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it seems like all of that was good. And they kept saying, "Well, we didn't have probable cause. We didn't have
They had
or what."
probable cause.
Yeah. What okay, so
They
what gave them probable cause then? They're saying there wasn't. So what gave it to them? Is it just
to
them being on the lawn or
if you come up on a scene where you have a dead person on the lawn, and you have a bunch of people that have been drinking and what have you, and you put two and two together, that alone gives you probable cause to be able to say, okay, I'm going to try to get a search warrant or whatever. They probably would have been able to get a telephonic search warrant on that just by
okay.
calling the judge and saying, here's what we've got a dead person on the lawn, he's got massive head injuries, we've got drunk people.
But they
We've
didn't know they
got,
were drunk yet though, did they? I don't know if they knew. Someone asked Karen, "Have you been drinking?" She said no, just because she hadn't like it had been several hours,
yeah,
but
maybe not, maybe not.
yeah.
Maybe that might be a good point. But all of the factors involved there definitely gave them cause to take it a
Okay.
step further. Yeah.
Okay. And then other evidence that I mean, what can you think of as far as, like, other evidence you're looking for? Okay, let's even say that you're the state police at this point.
Mhm. Mhm.
What other evidence are you wanting to make sure you immediately gather? Like, what would be the next thing for you?
So you want to certainly get the clothing, obviously.
Okay.
You want to get any potential, if if there's a weapon involved, you certainly want to get that. You want to at least look and see if there's a weapon. What caused these
Right.
massive head injuries with this guy. If you suspect the vehicle's involved, you want to try to seize the vehicle as quickly as possible. You want to collect the blood evidence, anything that could paint a picture of what actually happened there. And with regard to the blood evidence,
Oh, yeah, we gotta talk about that.
yeah, that's another thing that's really appalling to me. First of all, they went and got Dixie cups from a neighbor.
Solo cups
Yeah,
that you
solo
drink beer
cups,
out of at
right?
parties.
From
Yeah.
from a neighbor, and you don't know those cups. They
It
could be
was a sealed
contaminated with.
package. It was a sealed package, Scott.
Yeah. You don't collect blood evidence in a Dixie cup or a solo cup.
Correct.
You just don't.
Like, you
That's
leave
not
it there, right? So, like, if you had nothing else, they were saying we didn't want the elements to destroy that evidence, but, like, so you destroy it by putting it in a solo cup. I mean, like,
right.
it's better to just leave it there, right? I mean,
r-
okay,
Right. Yeah. For
okay.
for the time being, and until once your CSI team shows up, they have all that stuff to collect
Right,
the
right.
evidence properly. You bag it and you seal it up and you label it with the case number and you do it properly. You don't just take 6 unsealed solo cups and put it into a paper bag.
A Stop and Shop bag that's
Uh,
unsealed
yeah.
because they don't have tape.
Hmm.
Yeah, they weren't sterilized, Sonia. No, they weren't. They were not. And
Exactly.
then taking it back to the Sally port, plopping it next to the vehicle, and this was a long time after that because they didn't take the vehicle until they went to go interview Karen, and so that was,
Right.
like, 4:30 PM the next day.
Right.
And so they impound the car, they take that, they still so that was how many hours? And they still had the Solo cup sitting there with the blood in it, in the
Hmm.
paper bag opened next to the car.
Right. Right. And see, all of those things give the defense just an opportunity to attack the investigation like we were talking
Yeah,
about earlier before some of our viewers got here. If you do a sloppy investigation like that, boy oh boy, the
yeah,
defense is, especially if the defense has a case where they don't have a lot of evidence. I'm not saying they don't with Karen Reed because we don't know
yeah,
what they have yet, but
right,
if you have a case where there's not a lot of strong evidence for the defense, you're going to attack that investigation.
right.
And that's one thing you do. You attack the investigation. And like I was saying to you earlier, Rachel, if depending on the kind of case it is, sometimes you attack the victim too and go that
Yeah,
route.
yeah,
So, but any sloppiness like that gives the defense an opportunity to go down that road and say, you guys did a really crummy job with this. What
mhm,
else are you doing a crummy job with in this investigation? And
yeah.
that causes reasonable doubt.
Well, and so that's part of my thing is, like, so, first of all, Sonia, the, Canton Police Department showed up first, but then the state police was the other division that went to inspect the scene, later, much, much, much later, even a couple days later, like a week later, where they supposedly found all this other taillight fragment everywhere that
Hmm.
nobody saw before that. So it's very strange.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I was listening to, okay, so the Solo cups. So here's the thing. So I saw from somebody else posting, like, who really cares about the Solo cups? Like, the
Hmm.
blood is collected. If it's John's, okay, we know it was John's. It's like, is that really a breaker? Like, now if someone else's blood was found to be in there, then do we trust it? And if
Hmm.
no one can be identified from it, then that sucks because then we maybe could have known something. But I've seen some posts that are like, it really doesn't matter. If
Well, sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
No, that's all. Go ahead.
Okay. So it's a breaker from the standpoint that the defense can use that. They can say, okay, officer, what is the normal protocol when you collect blood trace evidence? and he will say, we collect it properly. We put it into whatever they put it into, whatever they use there, and we seal it and we label it with the case number, and everything's preserved properly. Okay, officer, is that what you did in this case? No, we did not. So then you stepped away from the normal procedures and protocol and policies. Yes, we did. And so in that respect, it is a deal breaker because
Yeah.
again, let's say, okay, maybe they got lucky and, the blood evidence was fine and nothing was contaminated, but that doesn't really matter because they did it improperly, and
Mhm.
that leaves it open for the defense to attack it.
To attack everything from there on out, because then you're like,
Yeah,
"Well, if you're not careful with that, then how can we trust that you were careful with anything?" And the
exactly.
guy even said on the stand when they asked him, "Was this a typical or standard way that you do things?" And he said, "Nothing about this scene was handled in a
Standard,
standard manner," or something to that effect, and I was like, "Well, that
which,
blows you out of the
oh yeah,
I mean,
that comment was like, my jaw dropped when he said that because
me
that
too. I was like,
not what he should have said.
yeah, well, it's not. I know the prosecution was probably like, "Crap, we reviewed this. You weren't supposed to say that." But
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it's very but they're trying to say, "No, it wasn't, but we did the best we could," and they're blaming the elements and such a
Hmm.
strange
Hmm.
situation and all of this, but I don't think that it matters. I don't think
Well,
saying that this is snow, we didn't know what to do. I also thought of something else. The guy that used the snowblower was like, "Oh, yeah, it was a, very effective way of getting layer by layer by layer of snow gone so we could see everything was that was there." And so he says this, right? Oh, he feels like, "Yeah, we gathered
mhm,
everything because of the snowblower or leaf blower. It was great." But then a week later, a bunch of fragments are found. So, like,
correct.
we don't know
Yeah.
where those fragments were found. We don't know where the body was exactly. We don't know where Karen's car was exactly.
Right.
Um,
Right. Depending on
yeah.
the resources that they had, and I'm talking about not only officer resources and body resources, but also, evidence resources, evidence collection. It's like you and I talked the other day, Rachel, when we were talking about a grid search. Remember that?
Yeah, tell them
And
about grid searches.
so one thing that they could have done there, if they had the resources,
Mhm.
is they could have just basically done a grid search of that area. And what a grid search is you break down the area, of the crime scene. You can outline it with string or with crime scene tape or whatever. You break it down into grids. Okay, like sometimes no bigger than my laptop here.
Okay.
Okay, and what they could have done, and this, if they had the resources, is instead of using the snowblower, just go in with, shovels or trowels or whatever, scoop that snow out, put it into, like a sifter, and sift it and let the snow fall through. And then you have left what you had left, which might have been pieces of tail light, pieces of glassware, whatever the case may be. It's very tedious, but it
Mhm.
works.
But also, I'm even thinking take bags, sterilized bags or whatever, and scoop up the 12 by 12 square of snow and put it in there, and then it's gonna melt, and whatever's left is left, right?
That's a very good point too.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
or they could go back but again, you had how many? Like, 3 officers on the scene, that's it,
Right.
and they
Right.
weren't ones that typically investigate this kind of stuff. State
Right.
police wasn't there yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, there's
it's
never a
wild.
perfect crime scene. And, police aren't robots. I mean, they make mistakes and they do the best they can with what they have to work with. But, that being said, there were a lot of mistakes, in my opinion, made in this initial investigation, and a lot of
Yeah,
sloppiness, from lack of documentation on statements to lack of follow up on statements that were made, that sort of thing.
right, right.
Mhm.
And so we also know from the, um this is something interesting that you brought up, and I just think it points to maybe, okay, I'm just gonna say maybe, points to just sort of the culture of these friends. Like, the
Mhm.
friend group kinda has a culture, and I don't know if that leaks into their professional life, but
Mhm.
it is something interesting considering they're in law enforcement, is that clearly we know that Karen had several drinks. I don't know
Mhm.
the exact number. I was trying to find that earlier, and I don't know, people say different things, but it was enough. We know her blood alcohol level was pretty high, estimated to be pretty high at the time,
Right.
that she got in the car and drove there with her police officer boyfriend,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
allowed her to drive in a blizzard
Mhm.
drunk.
Yes.
And a lot of these other people did too, drove back drunk. And so, like, that's just, I think that's an interesting thing to me. And I know that's not necessarily evidence of anybody's guilt or whatever,
Right.
but I think it's interesting information in terms of how they think as people, and the boundaries they're willing to push, and the
Mhm.
risks they're willing to take, and the breaking of rules that they're
Mhm.
willing to allow. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It makes sense, and you may have hit part of it on the cultural issue. I know it's pretty common back there in that area. They've talked about it at the trial to go out and have drinks, and then you rather than cab at home, you get in a car and you drive. Doesn't make it right, but
Yeah.
that's kind of sounds like it's kind of a thing. Um, so yeah, I don't really know what else to say about that except, yeah, you're right. I mean, it certainly could be a cultural thing. It does kind of go to the mindset of ththose involved a little bit, but
And, like,
I'll just
we're invincible. Like, I'm a
kind,
cop. I'm not gonna get in
yeah.
trouble for this.
I mean, I've seen that in my career with people that are police officers or work at their attorneys or whatever, and they go out and they get drunk and they drive.
Mhm.
And I have seen situations where they were actually driven home by the police officer because they didn't want to arrest them because of who they were.
Yeah.
So it
It's a
it
bad
does
look.
happen. It does
Yeah.
happen.
And it's a bad look, police are off duty and on duty are,
Hmm.
of anyone, probably expected to be the people that follow the rules, right?
Hmm. Right.
And they're in charge of making sure everybody's safe. So when they're
Hmm.
doing something that compromises the rules and keeping people safe, I think that's significant information. I think that shows a willingness to sorta, maybe a feeling of invincibility, maybe a willingness to sort of bend the rules a little bit,
Hmm.
not be, in line with your professional,
Yeah.
responsibilities and ethics, and so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think also, it sounds like Karen had a pretty high tolerance to alcohol, and I don't know what John's was. They haven't talked about that, but what I've heard pretty consistently is that she had at Waterfall, she had between 7 and 9 drinks, I believe.
Yeah.
Um,
I'd be
that would have,
knocked on my butt.
oh yeah, well, but she had a high tolerance. I mean, people said that she did not appear to be intoxicated or anything like that, and yet
Yeah.
when her BAC was taken, her blood alcohol content was taken the next morning, she was at 0.08, which is the
Yeah.
legal limit. So
Or
they're
that's what they
estimating,
estimated it to be when she left the bar. When they took her BAL, it was the next morning, but so they, like, kind of backtracked of, like, what they,
right.
based on how many drinks she had, what they thought it was back then, so
Right,
yeah.
and the figures I heard on that, they're estimating that she was between a 0.13 and a 0.27, I
Yeah,
believe.
that's crazy. Yeah,
That's
that's a
crazy,
lot.
crazy high. But
Yeah.
when if you have a high tolerance like that,
Yeah.
yeah,
I guess if you're functioning okay, and
yeah.
so here's another thing, we haven't heard what they're gonna do with this yet either. Oh, I was gonna say, it is a lot of drinks, Sonia. I have, like, 2 glasses of wine at dinner, and I'm like, "Ready for bed." Getting old. But yeah, so, the glass. So today I heard that Karen brought her own glass with her to the bar. That was
Yes,
what the witnesses were saying. And then also we see a video of John leaving the bar with a glass. I don't know if it's from the
correct.
bar. We don't really know. I don't know if they're gonna get to that or not, but one of the things people were saying is, "Well, did you check the barware at the house?
Right.
Was it a glass from the house? Did it match one from one of the bars you went to? If it was neither, then what does that even tell?" So there's just, like, these things that were missed that are so important to me.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
what I gleaned from that is that it was a glass that he had brought from the bar, and that Karen had also brought one, which maybe you're allowed. I don't know what the law
Yeah,
is in Massachusetts. Maybe you're
I don't
allowed
either.
to take drinks from the bar and walk around like you do in Vegas. I don't know,
Yeah, yeah, some
but
places you can do
s-
that.
I can't really comment good on that, but
I mean,
yeah,
it's
it's
pretty
still
easy
very
to walk out of
interesting.
a bar with a drink and no one stops you. I mean,
True,
especially if it
true.
was one of those areas where it's a small town, everything's close together, and the
Right.
bars just let you kinda come and go or whatever, but
Yep.
yeah. 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 So, I don't know, what other evidence was there that we should, hit on? I'm kinda looking at my list here. We've covered a lot.
Well, and I don't know what they did in terms of, diagrams and like we talked about earlier before some of our guests arrived.
Yeah.
Photography,
Yeah, I
those
haven't
sorts of
seen any of
things.
that.
I don't, they haven't really brought
I
that
haven't
up.
seen that. Like, I haven't
So,
seen this is where the body was, this is how many feet it was from the like, I don't think
right.
they took measurements. I
Doesn't
don't
sound like
I
it.
haven't seen any diagrams, like, this is
Yeah,
where we think the car was, this is where maybe they're getting
right.
to that?
Maybe. I don't know. I
Good.
mean, hopefully we are because
Uh-huh.
you at a scene like that, like I said to you earlier, Rachel, you have to take those photographs. You can't take too
Right.
many. You take them as as many as you think you need and then some. So
Yeah,
hopefully we're going to get to that. I don't know.
yeah. So we need to find out, we need to know, we need to do the research here and find out, is there a CSI attached to these police depart there has to be
Mhm.
CSI with Massachusetts State Police. There's no way that
Well,
there's not.
no, I'm sure there is, and at the
Yeah.
very least, at least with Boston PD,
Oh, yeah, there
when
has to be.
when I was on the homicide investigation team here, it was an interagency thing, and so
Mhm.
we had people from the sheriff's office, from the state police, we had people from the Bandon Police Department
Yeah,
south of here, from my department. So it's a multi-agency thing, and
right.
I know they have something back there like that. I mean, especially in a big city
Yeah.
like that. So I'm not sure why that wasn't employed,
I have
but
not heard any testimony because, I mean, they're going through all the people that were there, but they and we haven't heard from Proctor yet.
mhm.
So I'm hoping maybe they're still putting up CSI witnesses and we just haven't heard yet, so we can
Maybe
circle back,
what
but
it's looking like right now, though, and I'm not saying this is the case. I'm saying this is what it's looking like. We haven't heard
yeah,
everything. It's looking like they just kind of really didn't count the fact that this was a more serious situation, and that it's a bunch of police officers and an ATF guy in the house involved. There's no
mhm,
way that they could be involved in this, and they just
yeah,
kind of didn't go there.
right, right. Sonia is saying her own glass, who even does that? Okay,
I
so
know.
Um, uh, it's funny, I was thinking, maybe she knew they didn't have the drink that she really likes, like, if she brought one from home that she was already
Hmm.
drinking. I
Hmm.
mean, I've seen people do that just to save money, but
Sure.
she doesn't strike me as the person that was trying to save money, though, because I think that was one of the arguments she and John used to have, is that she would buy extravagant things for the kids, and he didn't like
Correct.
that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, when you're bar hopping, I don't think it's, like, super unusual, but
No.
I mean, I have a particular cup at home that I drink Diet Coke out of, and I will only drink Diet Coke out of that cup at my house. We call it cupology. There are certain cups that make your Diet Coke taste better,
Ah,
in
good
case you
to
didn't know
know.
that.
I did not
And
know that.
so I even take it with me, like, if we go visit the in-laws, I pack it so that I can drink my Diet Coke out of that cup and not their cups, which they probably think yes, they do. They probably already think I'm a weirdo. So it just adds a little more spice to that, probably already popular opinion among my
Ex-
family and his, but, which is fine. So I embrace it. But yeah, so I don't think it's like a you know, super
mhm.
unusual thing, but I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
she participates in cupology too, and she has to have her vodka tonic in a particular glass. I could respect
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say about this case, you guys, is that I mean, through the years, I've worked a lot of cases, homicide cases and other stuff too. And, I've watched a lot of trials unfold on television. This is one of the most hotly contested and divided cases that I can recall seeing in a very long time. And that being said, I mean, a lot of people have formed an opinion on one side or the other pretty quickly. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing because everyone's entitled to their opinion. I get that and I respect that, but there's a lot of trial to go yet. There's a lot of stuff
There's
to
a
be
lot.
heard. And,
Yeah.
we talked about earlier, Rachel, when we first started this broadcast today, that, we're not necessarily saying Karen's guilty. We're not saying that we're not speculating on who's guilty. There is a
Mhm.
lot, to go yet. And in my opinion, it's a little early to form for certain on one side or the other.
For sure.
That being said, it is really, really hard to convict on a case when you have a terrible investigation and sloppy police work.
It,
So I'm
it's
not
amazing to me
yeah,
that
you can introduce all kinds of evidence, but if the police messed up the investigation and didn't do it properly, that's a very big deal.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that they took this to trial. I mean, I think because it's a police officer, they had to pin this on someone. They had to take this to trial
Hmm.
because, and I'm sure they really do believe that Karen did this, and maybe she did. I don't know,
Maybe she did.
but it's just wild to me that I just think there is so much reasonable doubt as of
Hmm.
right now that
Hmm.
like that trumps anything else. I kind of feel like the prosecution witnesses are helping the defense a little bit, but
Hmm.
the defense is also doing a phenomenal job with cross-examination.
They are. She
I
has a
mean,
very solid team.
even as we were starting this and, who is it? Nicole Albert's on the stand,
Hmm.
and, I found her to sound very credible on direct. Like, I was like, "Okay," like, I don't know, she just seemed like, yeah, everything was very logical and reasonable and everything, and then on cross, I was like, "Ooh, boy."
Hmm.
Like, they're doing such a good job. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it'll be very
No,
interesting.
it's going to be very interesting. She's got a great team.
Mhm.
Sonia just posted a comment. I think she did it, but a true accident. I think that's very possible.
Yeah.
Um, but again, we just need to hear more evidence and see where this
Like I said,
goes.
yeah, like, I think regardless of what that, I think whoever or whatever happened was an accident. I don't think anyone
Hmm.
had it out for him. I don't think
Hmm.
anyone wanted him to die or be hurt.
Right.
Um, yeah, I think, but I don't know that you can convict somebody on this type of an investigation. As a juror,
Well,
I don't know how I would feel unless the medical examiner comes up and says, "The emblem from the car was stamped into his forehead,"
yeah,
then
exactly.
okay, but, I'm
Yeah.
kinda waiting for something like that.
Yeah, it's my opinion, knowing what I know now, and that may change because we've got
Right.
several weeks of this to go. But knowing what I know right now, my opinion is the Commonwealth overcharged this case.
Yeah.
I think they would have been safer to stay with maybe vehicular homicide, leaving
Mhm.
the scene, something like that, as opposed to intentional. I meant to kill him homicide.
Or
But
second degree, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I
So,
don't know, and who are we to say? I mean, it's kind of funny to me because I think, like, what they may have overcharged. How could they not realize they're overcharging? But you get, these cognitive errors, though, right? Which is probably what happened with the investigation. Like, the attorneys are
mhm,
so convinced on their own that this happened that everyone
mhm.
else must agree with them. It's like yeah,
Yeah,
you get
yeah,
tunnel vision.
yeah. They must have felt like they had a very strong case that they could prove, or they wouldn't have charged it that way.
Yeah.
So, according to Jen Coffindaffer, who's been on our show, and I spoke to her a couple of days ago, she says she thinks they threw in manslaughter in there too as a possible
They
charge.
did.
Okay, yeah.
They did.
So, um, there's
I still
that. But
I still think that's a lot, but I don't
mhm,
know.
mhm.
You've gotta be able to and these pictures of this car are terrible. Like, they could have had a shoe-in, like, they could have had if they could have taken a clear photo of anything, then maybe we would know, but I know the elements make it difficult because what those photos look like it could be snow or it could be a busted headlight, like, I can't
Yeah,
really tell,
yeah.
and that the
It's hard
next
to
picture
tell.
you see is after they already removed the taillight, and with all
Hmm.
the other mistakes that were made earlier, I'm like, "Well,
Yeah,
yeah, how do I
yeah.
trust they were processing this correctly and didn't
I
break it
agree.
off, and yeah,
I agree.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, there's a lot left to unfold, I feel.
yeah.
So,
And
we'll
what
just
are the odds that she backs out of John's driveway and hits his car, bumps his car with that exact taillight right before going to his what are the odds that that happens?
Pretty low, I would say.
That's insane. That complicates everything, right? The state could have an even much better case if that hadn't happened. It's, like,
Hmm.
wild to me that's so cool. That's one coincidence that, like, kinda couldn't really have been planned, right? I mean,
Right. Right.
that's
100%.
crazy. That's so
Yeah,
crazy.
it
Oh my
is.
gosh, this poor I say this poor woman and this poor family of John. I mean, poor everybody. This is, like, such a horrible situation. I'm sorry. We need to pause the show for a moment.
Oh, hello,
Somebody isn't
Sean.
somebody's an hour late to the show.
Sean,
Sean?
I'm preparing to file charges based
Yeah,
on your tardiness. I'm just saying.
Interpol's headed to your house right now. It's okay, Sean, we forgive you. We know you've got a lot going on. We forgive you fully.
That's all
It's
right.
okay.
That's all right, Sean. Thanks for being here.
You can offer us leniency next time then, not file charges on us. We appreciate
We're
you being here, Sean.
we're
Yeah,
we're,
see,
we're
I knew
not.
it.
See, there it is. See, Sean, what is wrong with you?
I hope we're never accused of anything, and then they go back and look at our chats from our videos and see that there's already people trying to get us. Yeah, I didn't beat Scott up today. I didn't argue with him like I said I was going to, but maybe in another.
Yeah.
If we disagree on whatever the verdict ends up being, then we'll come on here and duke it
Hmm.
out.
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
And I'll be pounding the table and Scott will just be laughing at me. That's probably how that'll go.
Probably. Yeah.
I can picture it. Awesome. Well, I like hate to end the show on this note. Scott, do you have anything else that you think we should any questions from our so I know we couldn't pull people
I
away from the actual trial, but
Yeah, like we've talked about, I think it's a little early yet to form an opinion one way or the other 100%. I think we just need to see more of the evidence as it comes forth. Everyone's certainly entitled to their opinion, and
mm,
but yeah, it's pretty early yet. There's a lot. Hopefully, there's a lot more to come in this. If there's
yeah.
not, then oh my gosh,
Yeah.
why are we doing a 6 or 7 or 8 week trial if there's not a whole heck of a lot more to come?
There is. They're, like, putting every single person who has ever looked at Karen Reed in her entire life up on the stand, which I guess that's fine, but one thing before you go, I do wanna say, point out is that's bothersome to me. I know that they changed to this smaller courtroom venue,
Mhm.
but you can't tell me there are not other options for O'Keefe's family than
Mhm.
sitting directly behind Karen. One, I don't know why they even wanna do that. I wouldn't wanna be close to the person that I think killed my brother or sister, whatever,
Mhm.
and but also, you can see the family is glaring at her, staring her down. I mean,
Yeah.
and I know she's made faces and stuff too, but I just feel like if we're gonna talk about, other people who have intimidated witnesses and and
Mhm.
and I am all for victim rights, 100%, I
Yeah.
don't want this to sound like I'm like, "Oh, well, what about her," "Free Karen Reed, and these are her rights," but I find it very odd that a judge would allow the victim's family to sit 2 feet away. Because here's another
Well,
thing, what if for safety purposes, what if, one of the brothers gets pissed off and decides, "This is my chance, I'm jumping this rail and I'm gonna get her."
mhm.
Easily jump over that rail and get to her.
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a little odd. I think
Like,
I think the
man,
reason it probably has not been addressed is because, first of all, it's going to take Karen saying something to her attorneys, and then the attorneys addressing it with the judge,
yeah.
and from there. And so maybe that hasn't happened. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I mean, maybe she doesn't care, I don't know, but it's
Yeah.
just like, if I were the judge, I feel like I'd be like, "You know what? You need to sit a row back, or we're gonna
Hmm.
switch some seats here." It just
Hmm.
seems improper to me. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I
It's a
guess
little.
no one's complained except me, and I don't know. So,
Yeah. I
yeah.
don't know.
All right.
All right. So thank you guys for being here.
Yeah.
We were gonna talk about Sebastian, but then we started thinking, okay, this is gonna take a while, so we were just gonna stick with this today.
Yes.
But certainly
Yes.
lots going on. Sebastian's still out there, and
Yeah.
there was a sentencing on, help me out,
Adam
Rachel.
Montgomery.
Thank you, Adam Montgomery,
Mhm.
which, if you guys haven't heard, he got life plus I think 50 some more years in addition
Yep.
to that. So
And they offered him right before their sentence recommendation. The state said, "If you tell us where Harmony's remains are, then we will change our sentence recommendations to be," I think it would equate to like 10 years less.
yeah, he would have
But
got 35 years.
his attorney got up and said, "Well, he didn't do this, so you can't expect him to admit guilt by telling where she is." I'm like, "Well, and then the prosecution got back up and said, "He said that he tampered with the body. He knows where she is. That's what we're talking about, is the
Yeah,
things he admitted to already." So, like,
yeah,
yeah, but he won't because he's like that. Um,
exactly.
I also noticed he was showing some side effects from antipsychotic medication. When they were showing him close up, I could see the muscle rigidity. He had these
Okay,
involuntary mouth movements. So he's convinced somebody up there at that jail that he needs to be medicated, um,
interesting.
and is mentally ill. And he was wearing the yellow pants, which a friend of mine knows someone who works up that way and confirmed that that's the color for the mental health unit.
Okay,
Um, so very interesting.
yeah, good info. I
I
didn't
mean,
know that.
hey, and look, I don't think I'll get canceled for saying this because I don't think there's any Adam Montgomery supporters out there. So I'm just gonna say it looks like he convinced someone he's mentally ill so he can stay drugged up and get less whole time and get more programming and like
Hmm.
an easier ride while he's in jail. But that's all I'm gonna say.
Yep, yep.
So
Okay,
okay.
all
We don't know
right,
what we're
guys.
doing next, guys, but we'll keep you posted.
We will definitely. Thank you all for being
Yeah.
here today, and you guys have a great
Yeah.
weekend and a good Mother's Day to all
Yes.
the mothers out there.
Yes. We'll see you guys soon. Bye.
Bye, guys.